the moon. Ba-dam, bam, ba-dam. Woo! War this weekend on Sunday. I'm going. Who's going with me? What's your favorite song by the band War, ladies and gentlemen? 44872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. Excuse me. So I had a chance earlier this morning to talk to Eric Trump about this campaign, and here's the interview, my friends.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us, Shelley Winter Show. I'm on the phone with Eric Trump. First question I got to ask you, brother, is your speech at the RNC convention. What were you trying to accomplish in that speech?
Well, I think a lot of things. I mean, it's certainly an emotional speech in so many ways, right? I was proud of my father. I was proud of, the nonsense they've put him through, meaning I'm proud of how hard he's fought back against the nonsense that they've put him through. And, I think he saw a lot of heart and soul and love in that speech. I mean, my father's put it out there for the last 10 years. He's done everything he can to fight for this country, the soul of this nation. And, so oftentimes that gets lost. And, I've seen it. I've seen the attacks firsthand. I've seen the arrows that they put in him. I've taken many of those arrows. I've seen what they've tried to do to our family. I've seen what they've tried to do to our company. I've seen how they've attacked him. And, here he is. I mean, this is literally 48 hours after, he got, shot in the face. And, he gets up there and he's getting up on the stage. I was honored enough to speak right before him. And, it's kind of certainly an emotional time and, a moment that I was very, very proud of.
We're on the phone with Eric Trump and talking to you about everything, brother. The pick of J.D. Vance. As a Trump supporter, I was a little put back because I, wanted someone like a Youngkin, someone just a little bit more moderate. That's what I was expecting, actually. And then when the pick of J.D. Vance came out, I had to sit back a little bit, thought about it, and I was like, you know what, this is kind of a great pick. Can you explain the process of why we picked J.D. Vance as our vice presidential pick?
Yeah, absolutely. So oftentimes I think it's when you look in on a process versus, being kind of part of a process, a little bit different. At the end of the day, when you're in the White House, you're in the Situation Room at 3 o'clock in the morning, you want to have somebody that you have chemistry with, right? And that's really important. You're going to be with somebody, 20 hours a day, every single day for a 4-year period of time. And, my father and JD just have had great chemistry. I mean, they're certainly, 100% in line in terms of positions. I think my father really respects him, maybe views him as a younger version of himself in a certain way, right? I mean, became massively successful in the private industry, went to government, became massively successful in government, rose the ranks, really quickly, but, came from absolutely nothing. He's got an amazing story to tell, and, and here he is. And, but beyond that, they get along well, and that's critically important. And so oftentimes you see these people creating picking VPs because they want to check some mythical boxes, and frankly, I think it's why we're in the situation that we're in right now. I mean, you have the most ineffective vice president in the United States history. Kamala's been an absolute disaster. She was tasked with 2 things. She was tasked with the border, which is an absolute wreck, right? We've had 13 million people come across our southern border. She's supposed to be border czar. She didn't do a damn thing about it. Now she says she wants to get quote unquote tough with the border. I mean, it's a joke and everybody knows it's a joke. By trying to check those boxes, I think that's what you get. And, my father found somebody who he's very aligned with, who, has tremendous energy, who has incredible kind of rags to riches story. And frankly, that just works from kind of a chemistry standpoint, and that's the person he chose.
Next question. Speaking of Vice President Harris and her candidacy, do you see it as strange in any way that on a Friday afternoon, let's say, the entirety of the Democrat Party and the media was defending Joe Biden, talking about Joe Biden being a great candidate, and 48 hours later, when he announced he's stepping down, everyone just flipped to her? What are your thoughts about that? And the second part of that question is, how do we combat what we're seeing out there regarding her candidacy?
Yeah, Michelle, of course that's the case. And, what's even more shocking is, 24 hours after she has all the delegates lined up, she had like 4,000 or 5,000 delegates lined up. She did that in 24 hours. Like, give me a break. I mean, tell me that wasn't pre-planned. Tell me that wasn't pre-baked. And everybody knows it was a hostile takeover. But 3 weeks before, the media was laughing at her, saying, she has to respect the system enough to pass the torch because she's been ineffective. And and remember, if you go back to 2020, she got no vote. I mean, she literally got no vote. And then all of a sudden, she's kind of the second coming. She's modern day Margaret Thatcher, right? It's people in this country don't believe it, but our country's hurting right now. I mean, prices on everything are through the roof. I just pulled out an article in a paper I was reading this morning. Car insurance is up 54%. Gas is up 50.5% over my father. My father had, $1.89 gas, right? Transportation is up 33%. Electricity is up 32%. Baby food's up 32%. Eating out, is up 25%. I mean, I can go on and on. Airfare, rent. I mean, rent is through the roof. And, people can't live anymore. It's crazy. You've had no, wage increases in this country. Wage increases have been totally stagnant in this country. You've had massive inflation. People have gotten crammed down. People can't live anymore. But what's interesting is all the price increases are things that you can't control, right? You can't control car insurance. You can't control gas prices. These are necessities of life. You can't control fuel oil, right, or electricity, or taxes, or your mortgage rates. Under my father, mortgage rates were 2.5%. Now they're 7%. It's eating people alive. Inflation is eating people alive, and everybody universally is coming out and saying, "I just can't live. I can't afford to live." My wages have been stagnant. The job market's horrible, and I can't afford to live. Everybody in this country feels that way.
We're on the phone with Eric Trump and talking about the upcoming election, as everyone knows. I have been adamant about getting Republicans to understand, disregard the polls, disregard.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to hear his answer to my question here. He just absolutely drops me with a hammer. Listen to this.
Disregard everything you're hearing from the media. We need people to get in the streets, knock on doors, phone bank, volunteer. We need a ground game, particularly here in Georgia. But one of the other things I've been railing about is when your dad gets off script and gets off the subject and gets into, the non-political stuff, the name-calling stuff like that. Is there any conversation within the campaign of telling him, hey, when you're on this message that you just spelled out, the economy, immigration, these political things that people really care about, you're winning. But when you get off script, that's when you get sidetracked. Is anyone saying that? And what's the response when people are saying that to him within the campaign?
Well, listen, I certainly think he's given so many unbelievable speeches. I mean, he gave one yesterday. He had 3,000 products behind him, all of which have gone through the roof in terms of price and everything else. And I thought that was incredibly disciplined. And, people have come after us. And maybe I take this a little bit personally as well, Shelley. Yeah. But, I mean, people have come after us. They've called me. They've called me the unthinkable. They've called him the unthinkable. And then he fires back, and all of a sudden it's, stay on script. And it's awfully hard to do that when you have an entire mainstream media who comes after you and makes up lies every single day. They come after you, they attack your family, they raid your house, they do everything that they've done to my father, right? And, then he fights back, and somebody says, you got to stay on script. It's awfully hard to do. It's also, I think, in life, hard to take kind of, the punch out of the puncher, right? To tell, Mike Tyson to punch a little softer, it's sometimes hard to do. That's ingrained in somebody's DNA. And frankly, it's exactly why he was an effective president, right? It's why the United States didn't get pushed around. It's why we weren't used and abused. It's why, it's probably the most effective administration in the history of this country, because he would punch back when there was an injustice. But listen, he's out there talking about these issues every single day. Our southern borders are wreck. Prices are an absolute disaster. Our world standing has gone to hell. You see what's happening in the Middle East right now. There's wars breaking out all over the world. America is no longer looked to as a superpower. Our national currency is certainly under threat from China. There's so many problems. We've got to be serious about these problems. I mean, we got to stop talking about 6'4" men swimming in women's sports, and we got to take care of our economy. We have to take care of our education. We're ranked 30th in the world in terms of education right now, Shelley. 30th in the world. I mean, we should be first in the world. We should be number one at absolutely everything we do. And yet it's just kind of all this nonsense on the side, and we got to become a serious country again, and we've got to take this country back because we're going in a horrible direction.
Well, let me tell you, that answer right there is all I needed to hear, brother. I stand corrected. I will never say it again on my show. Last question before I let you go. How do we get that message? How do we, not the surrogates, not the media, not myself as a guy on the radio, but what message do you have for Republican voters, particularly here in Georgia, on how we get out there and spread that message that you just eloquently laid out so we bring more people to our side?
In 2016, I'll give you a little story. In 2016, people would come up to me and they would whisper into my ear, "Hey, I'm voting for your father. Our church loves him. Our whole family loves him. Our whole neighborhood loves him. We're all going out. We're voting for your father." And now it's interesting. People aren't quiet anymore. People come out and they say it out loud, and they're proud to say it. And this is everything from college kids, youth voters, African American voters, Hispanic voters, right? I mean, areas where Republicans have never seen that kind of number. And listen, I think people need to make their voices heard. I mean, our country has gone down the tubes in a 3.5-year period, and everybody knows it. And sometimes people like a softer personality. Sometimes people like a tougher personality. I'm probably part of the latter, but I certainly am friends with a lot of people who are the former. But I don't think anybody can say that the Biden administration has been a successful administration. And Kamala has, I always look, she's located 8 feet. I mean, her office is literally 10 feet away from the Oval Office. And when you hear her press conferences, you'd almost make it believe that she's never met the guy before, that she wasn't part of the whole administration. Right. Day one, I'm going to focus on bringing down prices. It's Kamala, where the hell have you been? And so I think you got to get out there and clearly vote, but you also have to make your voices heard because, this country, again, we're going in a terrible direction. Everybody knows it. Everybody feels it. American can be number one at absolutely everything we do. We're the best country in the world. We just need politicians who aren't incompetent, and we need to bring back people who will actually be a cheerleader for this country and get back in this fight.